Maximize your yields while spreading out your workload with the earliest maturing winter cereal. Visit kws.com/CA to see how our hybrid rye varieties can work for you. High yields, high quality, high value for your farm. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody out there listening on the RealAg Radio podcast. Special treat for those of you that do listen on the podcast. We're making a bit of a change here. The podcast is now going to be a little bit more of an extended version. Here on Rural Radio, we gotta meet 48 minutes. It's only an hour show. On the podcast now, you're going to hear the full extended interview. So a bit of the show will feel a little bit, or will be a little bit longer, and you'll get the full perspective from our guests. So you can find the RealAg Radio podcast by going to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Basically, wherever you can get a podcast, you can find RealAg Radio. Today on the show, it is brought to you by the AgSmart Educational Expo that is being hosted and presented by Olds College. It's coming up very shortly, July 30th and 31st. That's next week, everybody. You can find out more by going to agsmartolds.ca. And of course, we're going to have Todd Ormann from Olds College here on the program to talk about all the things that are going on at this year's event. We are fully loaded today. We got Steve Nicholson. He is with Rabobank. We're going to talk about the markets, what's going on. We've had a bit of a bounce in crops like corn. We got a rally or an opportunity to take some risk off the table. We'll also be joined by Jim Wiesemeyer of Pro Farmer. We're going to talk about what is going on in the U.S. with a big chain of events here in the past 3 weeks. We had an attempted assassination. We had a debate that went tragically wrong for one of the candidates. Then we had an attempted assassination. Now we've got a sitting president that decided that he is not going to let his name stand in the fall election. A lot is going on. And what does it actually mean for the farm bill? So we'll get Jim's thoughts on all of that. And we'll also talk today about C-59. This is some very concerning piece of legislation. It is all about greenwashing, and you may be saying to yourself, hey, yeah, we don't want any greenwashing. It's also going to impact the industry of agriculture. We're going to have to prove ourselves, but we really don't know what the guardrails and the framework is yet, of course. We're doing things a little bit backwards, it seems. We're going to be joined today by Margot Patterson. She is counsel with Dentons, based in Ottawa, to talk about C-59 today on the program. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we've got Steve Nicholson to talk markets. He's with Rabobank, and we'll be back right after this. It's now time for a product spotlight. Vice President of Investor Relations with Genesis Fertilizers, it is Barry Mann. What impact are these global trends having on Canadian farmers?
When you look at the shipping routes and you look at the actual maps of where fertilizer is moving around the world, you really don't see a lot coming into North America, right? There's enough just to kind of meet that demand. So we're targeting those farmers that want to be directly vertically integrated, because Genesis will sell at market price. We're just joining the market. But the difference is, instead of major hedge funds and foreign governments owning our fertilizer production, it's going to be owned by the farmers. So the farmers are coming on, they're investing to a level that represents their fertilizer usage on the farm. They then receive the profits and the dividends on those tons. So their net fertilizer price at the end of the day will be closer to the manufacturer's cost, which right now is about $240 in Western Canada. So when it's selling at $700 or $800, or in 2022, $1,250, there's a significant amount of profitability that are going to come back to the farm.
Make sure you go to genesisfertilizers.com.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, fava beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today, of course, by AgSmart Olds. The big expo that's happening here very, very quickly, the Educational Expo in Olds, Alberta, presented by Olds College. You can find out more by going to agsmartolds.ca. Well, let's lead off today's show talking about the markets, and there's lots happening. I like how I've seen a little bit of a bump in corn. We'll see what that means for those of us that are trying to move some inventory, maybe some 23 and 24. Joining us right now is Steve Nicholson. He is with Rabobank. Steve, how's it going?
Good, Shaun. Good to see you as always. Good to talk to. Yes, as we talked a little bit before we started recording, what could possibly go wrong at this point as we go forward here?
Yeah, so we have seen a bit of a lift here. How do we interpret it?
Yeah, I think we have to be very cautious about interpreting this as a rally into harvest or something like that. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One is this is, we're in the middle of the growing season. Weather has an impact, and the markets have basically taken all the risk out. And so anything that comes back in that looks like could be a risk, the market's going to have to think about that and reprice that in. And I think that's what you're seeing here a little bit. I want to come back to that in a minute. The other kind of put in parentheses in the middle of this is that you have, the money folks. The funds are very, very short. All these markets are net short positions. And so they see a little bit of situation. This is going to shake those shorts out or chase those shorts out a little bit. And so you're going to see a bit of lift in the market. But I think you have to, as a producer, and you framed it very well, people have some 23 crop they have to move. They probably need to do some pricing of 24 crop. I'm sure people are not fully priced on 24 crop yet. And I think you have to reward these rallies. And we've said this basically since last spring or last winter, is on these rallies, you need to reward this and move on and not think about, could it go higher? Now, this is probably a bit of a stretch, but if these rallies put you in a position where you can market that crop and lock in a good, a positive margin, then you need to move it and move on, because you've got as I saw in Saskatchewan last week, and you see here on the other side of the border, you've got a big corn crop on the way right now. You've got a good canola crop, a good wheat crop, a good barley crop coming on there in Canada, and a potentially good soybean crop coming on here in the States. We have more acres. You've got a lot of supply potentially coming to the market here within the next 60 days.
Yeah, and I know there are some struggles in certain parts of Canada and the U.S., but overall, this market is dealing with a supply issue. I heard last week a market analyst said to me, farmers are just too good at their job.
Well, I mean, there's some truth to that. Farmers are very good at what they do, but you're right. And we shouldn't diminish those areas, whether it's in Canada or whether it's in the U.S. that they've had too much rain, they've had too much wind, or they've had some hail. And so they're not going to have a great crop. But when you look at the overall condition of the crop and you start lining up now, as we always used to say, you kind of go down the list. Did you get it planted on time? Yes, check that box. Did it emerge? Yes, check that box. How's the weather been? Fairly benign, so you can check that box. In the case of corn, you're now likely at least 2/3, if not more, through pollination, and so that looks like that you check that box, and so you've got a supply issue, and farmers are bred to produce. That's what they want to do, and that's what's going to happen this year. We're going to see a good crop, and Mother Nature's cooperate as well.
Well, you got to kind of look at the probabilities, right? If you look at December corn, you and I are having this conversation right now. It's trading at 421 on D's. Okay.
Yep.
What's a higher probability? 450 or 350?
Right.
And we're closer to 450, but I don't know. It seems like we got a lot more downside risk based on some of the things that people like yourself are telling me.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what you have to look at. Where is your upside risk and where's your downside risk? And you potentially, and Deese has told you that really, it's gone to 450 this year. We'll put it in those round numbers.
Yep.
And I'm just going to look at a chart while we're talking here. Yeah. So have you seen a high of around $5 by 510, but the chances of it going there, and you see the most recent high is around 440. Okay. And you've also seen the lowest low has been around 390. So you just look at that range that we've been in, and we're closer to the 440 than we are to the 390 at the moment. So this is an opportunity. And to your point, you look at the supply side, your downside risk is you have more opportunity there than you do on the upside. And you have to reward that rally for sure.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I want to bring you on today, because Rabobank's got connections all around the world. We focus a lot at this time of the year during the growing season on supply, and we've covered that now. Let's talk about demand. What are you hearing, and what is your forecast? Can the demand surprise us? Because we can look out our window and get an idea surprising up and down on the yield standpoint, but what about demand?
Yeah, and I think we have to. This is a bit of a nuanced discussion, and I want to kind of come back. Let's look at the last several years first, because before we got into the supply side is, overwhelming markets, it's like, oh, demand's horrible, it's soft, it's, we're going to zero and all these sorts of things. And I always want to take people back and say, okay, if you look at corn, wheat, and soybean demand globally, the domestic demand, I went back to 1970s, went all the way back to the 70s and looked at that demand. Now, my econometrics professor would cringe at this, but you could almost draw a straight line from that 1970 number all the way up to today, and it's a straight line going up. And so demand is not soft. In that time, we've had 5 times where we've had year-over-year decrease in demand. The biggest being 1974 was 3.5%, but everything after that has been less than 1% demand. So demand is not soft and it's not going away. So I want to give that little history lesson. But what you have seen is we don't have any supply shocks. And when we get a supply shock, the buyer's going, he or she goes, oh my gosh, I'm not able to get what I want. And so we bring demand forward so it looks like really robust demand. But now you have supply is adequate, and we've seen stocks growing of both corn and soybeans. Wheat's been a little bit more problematic in the world, and kind of oil seeds in general. And so that demand side looks like it's soft, but really the reality is in the aggregate, it's going to grow year over year. It's going to be more hand to mouth. And so, I think that we have to think about that, in that broad context. But having said that, to go back to a more specific question, Asia is to continue going to be a good demander of grains and oilseeds. Now China, of course, has had a bit of a soft economy. You have to worry about that a little bit, but you're still feeding 1.4 billion people every day out 3 times a day there. But you also have to look at India, and you also look at, Southeast Asia. Those are areas that are growing. They have more money in their pocket. They have more income, if you want to put it that way as well. And so that demand from those parts of the world will continue to grow and be good customers for those of us here in North America. Now, there's obviously more competition for us here in North America to move our crops, because you have South America always there, Europe. But the fact is, you've got, some pockets, particularly on the wheat side, where you're going to have close to 15 to 20 million metric tons of less production across Europe and Asia, Russia in particular, that won't be available, which is going to have to find a home, or is going to have to find, those importers have to find a home or a seller someplace, which means they'll likely come here back to North America. So I am not worried about the demand side. Now, there are particular issues if you look over the medium to longer term that you have to worry about. But I think, you think about where we are today and tomorrow and next year and the year after, the demand will be there, particularly at lower prices. It's a long answer.
Yeah, no, that's good. I pulled up a December spring wheat chart.
And, sure.
Okay, and I just got what a roller coaster. and a crop that clearly can't figure out what it wants to be when it grows up this year. We're sideways trading to the 3rd week of April. Then that I can remember doing interviews with market analysts about that. Do we really want wheat to be leading the market higher, which it was, right? We almost get to $8, and then it makes the decision, you know what? Let's go to 6. And it bombs lower, does a little bit of a bounce, bombs lower again. It pretty looks like it does trade a little bit below $6, and now we're 6.34 and change. So, what is going on with spring wheat?
Yeah, I think and I'm going to put it, spring wheat to me is always a mystery because I agree with you. This is a crop that there's not many places in the world that produce, spring wheat, and produce this sort of quality of spring wheat. And so, there's not a big pocket, there's not a big bushel basket full of it around the globe. So you kind of sit there scratching your head and say, why is Minneapolis wheat going through the tube when you got not many people making, hard red spring and winter wheat around the world? Yeah. But I do think, unfortunately, what happened with wheat was, and the fundamentals absolutely supported your premise of your question. For any wheat crop, because you had relatively low stocks, but you did see several things that caused wheat to have this dive of $2 basically in spring wheat. Was you had a corn market that was sick and continued to get sicker, and so you saw it go down. You then had, you had issues in Russia, but Russia, keep in mind before this was just dumping wheat on the world market, and the world is like, it doesn't look like they're ever going to stop. And then you had the U.S. winter wheat crop continue to get bigger, and that's still the case today. And so, and at that time too, the market was like, the wheat crop around the world looks pretty good. And so, people thought, well, we're going to be fine. We don't need to put a premium here in the wheat market. Now, we found differently once we got here is that, yes, the U.S. winter wheat crop is getting bigger. The European, the Ukrainian, the Russian crop was getting smaller. The Australian crop was basically flat. I mean, it was average. It was a good average crop. It wasn't what they had the last 3 years. And the fact is, there were some expectations that we would see a little bit of a bump up in stocks, which isn't really materializing when you look at the global market right now. But, when I look at spring wheat, you're like, I agree with you. It's like the wheat market, still the fundamentals are still relatively favorable to be supporting to prices. But if you can't get corn price to have any sort of life about it, it's going to be very difficult to support wheat prices going forward, unfortunately, because you have this, and not that you should be feeding spring wheat, but then you have, not necessarily in our part of the world, but other parts of the world, that spring, that wheat feeds into a feed ration.
That's why we always start with corn, because we need corn to lead. If we're going to go higher,
that's right.
Corn to lead that charge, right or wrong, indifferent. I don't care if you don't have corn within 50 miles of your farm or 500 miles of your farm. You need to be watching that corn future because that's the indicator.
Right. That's exactly right. And I come from Iowa, which is a corn state. So, I'm glad about that. But
you're wearing your corn pajamas at night.
Exactly. I wear my corn pajamas and my corn hat going to bed at night. Exactly. But the fact is that corn is the lead of the complex, and rarely does it give up that lead. And so it leads everybody down, it leads everybody up. And you did see, I said the same thing last winter. I said wheat could be the leader of the complex here just because of the fundamentals. And it did do that for a bit, but it didn't do it for very long. And I think it's a reminder again that, because corn fits into so many pockets, it fits into the food chain, it fits into the feed chain, it fits into the biofuel chain, and also just the sheer volume and the liquidity of that market is what leads all the other markets up and down. And so, yeah.
Hey, Steve, is there an election trade here? Because that's a factor. We've got tough China talking policies happening right now in this U.S. election. China's a big buyer of commodities. Is there some election risks that we need to be aware of when we're thinking about our crop marketing plan for this year?
Yeah, I'm going to be a smart aleck for a minute. I said anything I say today will change next week because we've had so much happen in 2 weeks. It's like, what else? Yeah, so I need to pay that disclaimer up front. But I do think it's a valid question, something producers and traders need to be thinking about. Also keep in mind, there's a lot of protectionist talk around the world and a lot of protectionist trade moves around the globe. And you're also having 64 elections around the globe this year, which is unprecedented time. So you have a lot of rhetoric, and once you get past the election, some of that rhetoric fades in the background. I'll use a couple examples. India, Modi was all over this, and rice, we're gonna ban rice exports, or they pulled back on rice exports a year ago. We're gonna do the same thing with wheat, and now the election's over. Well, we've lifted the rice export bans, and a much different attitude. Same thing think about Mexican corn. Well, we're not gonna take a GMO corn. Well, that talk's kind of faded in the background now that their election's over. So I think you need to think that in mind. But from a U.S. perspective, I think we have to be a little bit concerned about who gets elected. Trump has been very clear about, I'm going to add 10% tariffs to everything we import. I'm going to put 60% tariffs on China. And, he hadn't said anything about, well, they might retaliate. Well, we know they were going to retaliate because they did in 17 and 18, and U.S. farmers have had to suffer through that. And we're still sort of suffering through that hangover, if you have it. But I think, when I look at it from an agricultural perspective and all the protectionist movements, all the bilateral, trilateral trade agreements, that doesn't help agriculture. Agriculture thrives in a more free trade agreement where everybody participates with the same rules. And when you have multiple different sets of rules across the globe, that makes it much more difficult for anybody, but particularly agriculture, because we have a fungible commodity that needs to move. And so I'm concerned about that. My hope is that once we get past the election rhetoric, that maybe we can get back a little more pragmatic here and really think about, okay, what are the issues we need to address, and let's talk about them rather than to use a blunt instrument like tariffs. And at the same time, the Biden administration, agriculture will tell you, has been a little disappointed in not addressing trade issues. Yep. So hopefully we can get over that after the election and move forward.
Steve, this has been fantastic. It's always great to chat with you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Great questions. It is great to chat with you, and it is a fascinating time, as always, to be in agriculture and markets, for sure.
Yeah, it's not getting any easier to market your crop. That is, we've got that part figured out. Indeed, that is Steve Nicholson. Yeah. He is with Rabobank. Hey, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from Todd Ormann from Olds College. We're going to hear all about the AgSmart Educational Expo coming up soon. You can find out more by, of course, going to agsmartolds.ca. Stick with us through the break, and you're going to hear more from Todd Ormann right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
It's now time for a product spotlight with Vatterstad. Director of Sales for Western Canada is Philip Korzak.
The market and our customers specifically have been asking for increased capacity in their seeding systems so that they can stay in the field longer. So Vatterstad is very excited, offering an all-new size in our precision delivery tank line, which is our biggest that we now have. This 1,350 bushel cart will have individual weight scales on each bin, individual electronic metering for each primary per bin, industry-leading section control, and more features that are out there. Unique to this new PD 1350 are a redesigned front axle, allowing for the accommodation of dual tires. The rear axle is also getting a larger set of tires. You will have 900 dual. So with this increased footprint front and rear, compaction is minimized. A hydraulically engaged braking system is on the rear axle to also ensure the safety of our operators with this large amount of product.
So if somebody wants more information, Philip, where do they go?
Vatterstad.com. Go under the seating tab. You're more than welcome to reach out to your local Vatterstad dealer for more information.
It's now time here on RealAg Radio for a product spotlight with Olds College. And we're joined right now by the Vice President of Development at Olds College. It is Todd Ormann. Hey, Todd, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Shaun?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. The growing season is humming along, and we're definitely getting some heat, maybe a little bit too much in some parts. Lots to discuss. You got a big event happening at Olds College coming up here very shortly. It's called AgSmart. So from your perspective inside Olds College, why is AgSmart important to the industry?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for that perspective. First off, like as you know, Shaun, like we do a lot of applied research. That's what we do. Our goal here is to validate technologies and share that out. And you don't do research for research alone. Like you really should be talking about what your research is and showcasing that. And so for us, AgSmart has been this event that allows us to showcase and talk about those things that we're doing, right? So if we're looking on precision ag technologies, we're looking at variable rate pieces or environmental pieces or animal health pieces, it gives us an opportunity to talk about our research and then showcase that as well. So that's for us what it's really important for. But I think what's unique about AgSmart is the fact that it is an educational exposition. So when you look at things like AIM and AgriTrade, they're great, big, huge sales events, right? Well, there is a little bit of sales here, and we've got a number of vendors that, set up. Primarily, our focus here too is just what I just said earlier, is to talk about this in a much more of an educational perspective. So there will be a number of seminars set up. There'll be demonstrations in it, and even the companies that are here too. It is not a salesy thing. It is a little bit more about how their things operate, how they work, right? Tends to be a little bit more of the bleeding edge technology, and it's an opportunity for farmers to learn as much as it is for them to get sold to.
Yeah, but bleeding edge, but at the same time very practical in sense too, because it's tangible. It is. Yeah.
It is. And that's about applied research too. Like, we don't do discovery research here, right? We test things that are kind of unique and new and could be influencing ag in the future, because it's usually a minimal viable product to that end stage of development. And again, it is to showcase, does it really work in the world of agriculture?
What year is it for the event?
This is the 5th year for the event.
Okay, cool. So there's a lot of things that have changed in the industry in the last 5 years since you first started this concept.
It has actually. Like, so when you think about, like, even 5 years ago, like if you look at ag tech in general, right? Like ag tech was, probably about 2 years ago, it peaked out in terms of what you would have seen as venture capital in the marketplace. And I would argue too, and my background, Shaun, I worked for places like Farmer's Edge, and I was at TELUS, and I was, buying up some of these companies, right? There was a sense that some of these companies were going to kind of take over and rule the world. And some of them have had significant influence in that space. But what I've seen too is a little bit more of a practical reality of where these technologies are playing as well, in terms of how they're going to, again, support industry and support other brands, potentially like a John Deere or CNH or Bayer or that nature, right? So it's a little bit more practical. And to be honest too, compared to even 5-6 years ago, a lot of these companies have matured. I do see some of their solutions is a lot more realistic as well. They're not just all pie in the sky type of stuff.
Yeah, but reality check. That's how I would put a bit of a reality check. Okay, so what are some of the highlights for AgSmart this year that you're looking forward to featuring?
Yeah, a couple of things there too. I think that are kind of unique. So one would be the growth of the seed side. So we started off very much in the area of ag tech and a lot of venture in a lot of those small SMEs, but we are seeing growth on the seed varieties. And so the crop diagnostic days are going to be here as well. And you're going to have Alberta Grains and Pulse Growers and the Canteras and that. Their varieties are now being showcased as well at the campus. And so that's a pretty decent size show in the show itself, right? So you're going to have, I think we got 4 times as many seed plots as we had last year. So if you're looking for, that ability to kind of look at what the next cereal varieties are and the pulse variety, like that, it's a nice show for that. And then the other thing that I think is a little bit more unique, or for us is the show in the show. So, the day before we have a discovery lab, which is a pitch competition for a number of companies that are being done. We have the Simmental Association on campus. We have the young farmers coming on campus. AFSC has an event coming on campus at the same time within the show. And then, of course, we have this crop diagnostic days. So that ability to have the show in the show seems to have worked fairly well. And I'm expecting to see the numbers to be up this year compared to last year.
Great stuff. Well, of course, the Olds College AgSmart Expo is today's show sponsor. If you want to find out more, go to agsmartolds.ca. There's a day pass, or you can get the 2-day pass. 2 days of this kind of learning for $80 seems
pretty cheap.
Pretty good value for people out there. So, hey, Todd, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really appreciate it. Keep up the great work at Olds College. There's so much going on every single week. I really appreciate you joining us here today and being the show sponsor.
Thanks, Shaun.
Okay, we'll be right back here on RealAg Radio, brought to you by the AgSmart Educational Expo.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by the AgSmart Educational Expo. You can find out more by going to agsmartolds.ca. Let's find out what is going on in the U.S. right now politically and the impact it has on agricultural policy. Joining us right now is D.C. policy insider and analyst for Pro Farmer. It is Jim Wiesemeyer. Hey, Jim, how's it going?
Pretty good. We've been a witness to history, all of us, the last week, ever since the attempted assassination and the withdrawal of the race from our President Joe Biden.
Yeah. Have you gotten more than 3 hours of sleep the past week and night?
About 3 to 4 in evening, and that's not a lie. I don't have to be a politician. That's the truth.
Okay, so yeah, the last 3 weeks have been a whirlwind. Between, we saw the debate that triggered a chain of events here that have transpired that is really, truly unprecedented. I don't know. It's been something we're all going to remember going forward, and we'll read about in textbooks. What's your read on the president deciding not to run, and it looks like the selection will be Kamala Harris, the vice president. Is that a good strategy by the Democrats in your opinion?
Well, I heard earlier today, it's akin to like you're being on the Titanic and there's only one boat that goes by, so you get on it. This was a power play by the kingpin leaders in the Democratic Party. And by that, I mean Nancy Pelosi, the former speaker, Barack Obama, and the two leaders of the Democrats in Congress. This was a power play. They basically told Biden if he doesn't go willingly, he would be pushed.
Does it serve them well in the general to decide on who the candidate's going to be in this form or fashion? Like, doesn't it create a narrative, true or not? Doesn't it create a whole narrative for the Republicans to say, like, hey, like, they actually, this isn't a monarchy. You don't appoint somebody to be the leader of a party. That's kind of what happened here. But also that's where the funders have also put the money as well. They've spoken with their checkbooks. So is it a good strategy in the sense, does it create a narrative for the Republicans to really lean on?
Well, the Republicans will say that, but the Democrats are, at least there's a honeymoon period for Vice President Kamala Harris right now. And I don't know how long that's going to last, but I don't think they had much choice on the Democratic side. And the primaries, they did vote for the combined Biden-Kamala Harris ticket. And I don't think they wanted to go to the August 19th beginning of the Democratic National Convention with an open forum. It really, you have to go back to the old days where it was the backroom leaders of the party deciding. Again, I don't think they had a choice.
Heard a poll yesterday, 46-45 in favor of Trump versus Harris, 9% undecided. This is a changed race. Game on.
Yeah, it was going to be close anyway, because even though the Democrats were alarmed, and they should have been, with Biden's performance, both his age and acuity, and we're going to hear that this evening at 8 o'clock Eastern time, the reasons why he got out, at least from his perspective. But when you had Democrats saying that it was going to be a bloodbath for them in the elections, I think that was a signal to get their Democrats to come to actually vote. We're a 50-50 country, and it was going to be close anyway. And that's what the polls are showing right now. And you were correct. It's going to depend on the independent. That 9 to as much as 15% of the American voters who are truly independent, and their vote is still up for grabs.
When you think about from the Republican side, I don't know if this is worst case scenario, but this is the scenario they were not cheering for. And I always thought this is why Trump was so quiet after that debate where Biden performed so poorly. This is why I thought he was quiet, because this is not what he wanted to have happen.
That's clearly their opposition research, their ads. It's not only going to be a lot more money and expenses for the Democrats, but also for the Republicans. And now with a female at the head of the ticket, you're going to have to be sensitive to that issue. And we all know that, former President Trump has problems with sensitivity. So he's going to have to throttle back in the next few months until election day, and in the debates.
Well, he said he will debate her, and multiple times. I have heard numerous political analysts say that if they were the Republicans, they would keep Trump away from debating her. Her experience, she's not a great campaigner, but she, former prosecutor, very good from a debate standpoint. That seemed to be like from a political analyst standpoint. That's what I was hearing a lot of the past few days. But it sounds like they're going to debate. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah, we'll have at least one, if not two more debates. And now Trump has said he doesn't want it to be now on ABC News, which is a clear signal he wants Fox. So I think that's an unknown at this time. But yeah, really the last time Kamala Harris was effective in people's judgments was when she was a senator, and she asked a lot of hard questions on the Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh, if I recall, and you can tell she's getting confidence. That you can just tell in her initial campaign speeches. So we'll see if that continues. But the Republicans, if they are smart, and a lot of times they are not in campaigns, they'll just go to the positions. She's to the left, more liberal than Biden, and they should drive that home, at least from their perspective.
Yeah. What does this do for the Farm Bill? And I know these are not totally connected, but we've been seeing the past number of weeks where if the Republicans are going to potentially control all three areas of government, might as well wait. Now what?
This almost guarantees that the only chance that you're going to have a new farm bill this calendar year is after the election. So we're going to have to see the lay of the land, because you've got the Democrats recharged, at least right now. The enthusiasm is back. So I think that gap that was there when Biden was at the top of the ticket is dramatically narrowing, which means more voters, which means maybe fewer young black people voting for Trump than would have been before. Fewer Hispanic voters. What that means for the Farm Bill is that it's on hold, and so dramatic. You're going to have another extension of the 2018 Farm Bill. Why I say there's still a chance in the lame duck session after November 5th elections is if the Republicans run the gambit and win the White House, and Senate. A Republican new president, in this case Trump, they want to begin with as clear of a deck as possible. and they don't want to go through a farm bill debate in 2025. Absent that, you've got it going the other way. G.T. Thompson, the House Ag Committee chairman, yesterday, he vented against Senate Ag Committee chairwoman, Republican Debbie Stabenow. I mean, he took the gloves off. So you can say it's going the other way, Shaun, as far as the animosity between the House and Senate Ag Committee. There's no bipartisan spirit up there right now.
And what are they like? What is creating that or fueling that separation from where they appeared to be a little bit more reconciliatory, months ago?
Yeah, the coalition that usually got you farm bills, Thompson said that's a facade right now that Stabenow keeps building on, that she says it should be bipartisan, should be a coalition. That's a signal they want no changes in food stamp program funding, or how it's operated under Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act of the secretaries, the ag, secretary's flexibility on that, and of course climate conservation spending. Now, and the Republicans are frustrated because they know they need an additional $53 billion on top of the $1.51 trillion cost of the farm bill over 10 years. Why I say it still could happen in a supplemental spending bill or an end of year bill after the election. There could be a meetings of the minds where the leadership in both the House and Senate, both political parties, say, okay, no changes in food stamps, and by the way, Thompson, here's the money that you need. While the odds are against that, you cannot rule that out.
What about China? Going back to the two candidates, we know where Biden stood on China, it seemed. We know where Trump stands on China. Both have records there. When I was with Chip Flory, host of AgriTalk last week down in Memphis at the Helena Innovation Expo last week, you talked to cotton growers, super concerned about China policy indeed. Where would Harris be on China? Any indications?
Well, she would be aggressive. Both political parties, the Democrats and Republicans, are being aggressive against China. So that means they're both trade protectionists too, and that's what has U.S. farmers and ranchers very nervous. Now, Republican-oriented farmers think and hope that if it's Trump again in the White House, that they will have income transfer payments like what occurred in the U.S.-China trade war before. They're probably correct in that environment. But Trump would be even more aggressive in challenging China than any Harris administration. Here's an example we just saw yesterday. Elon Musk, the Tesla guy, said he's delaying any expansion of his plants in Mexico until he sees the results of the election. Now, I think that answers your question, Shaun, because they want to see if he's going to get real aggressive, Trump will take aspects to bring the manufacturers of cars into the United States, not Mexico.
Yeah, trying to cut out the nearshoring.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, to wrap up here, just curious, we saw the withdrawal out of the campaign by President Biden. It was in relation to a poor performance versus Trump. What if it had been Haley? Would we have had the same? Would there have been as much pressure on him, or is it like? Or is it
would have been Haley what?
Like, say it was Haley versus Biden and he had performed that poorly. Like, to me, there's like the Trump factor. Everything is so like, and there's such a history between the two.
See, I think that the facade, the allure, that they are not all the media in the U.S., but it's Democratic oriented. They lost their battle of protecting Biden after that, after the first debate, and the Wizard of Oz was found out what he was, and where most Americans were. And so that was it. So no, I think no matter who it was, and plus he ever since that, it looks like he's getting worse from an acuity perspective. I hate to see that. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. So
Yeah.
no, I think that it was obvious to most Americans, even our press, because they didn't have a curtain to hide behind any longer.
Yeah, well, hey, we've Ronald Reagan, right? There was at the tail
Last
end of
6
that.
months of his term, it was bad. Yes, it was bad. Yeah, and that's why it'll be curious tonight how President Biden addresses the remainder of the time he has in the White House. Is he up to it? So that'll be a particular focus. I know that the Republicans are saying if he can't run for president, he should resign from the White House. We'll see.
Yeah.
But anyway, I want a bottom line again for agriculture. What farmers are going to look for is their policies on energy. Harris was banning fracking, so that's going to be a problem for her in Pennsylvania. They want to hear what they have to say on taxes, because the state taxes, there's a wide difference between Harris and Trump on taxes. And it just on immigration policy. Eventually it's going to get to the issues, and that's where most of the prognosticators still will tilt toward Trump winning this election. But we've got a long ways to go between now and November 5th.
Yeah, this thing got a whole lot more interesting in the last few days.
It
Hey,
did.
Jim, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Anytime.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to talk about some of the financial consequences of greenwashing in a new government bill. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, brought to you by AgSmart Educational Expo.
Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety, enhanced weed control, and a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by the AgSmart Educational Expo. We heard Todd Ormann from Olds College a little bit earlier on in the program. And if you want to find out more, go to agsmartolds.ca. Now we're going to talk about an issue as it pertains to, it's a broad issue, but I think it's going to have an impact on agriculture. And we're going to get the details here from a legal perspective. We're joined right now by Margot Patterson. She is counsel with Dentons, and she's a part of the regulatory practice group within the firm. Margot, great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's start broadly. I picked this up in the Globe and Mail. This is going back a couple months ago. Oil and gas industry very concerned. What is C-59?
So C-59 is a broad piece of legislation that was introduced some time ago. The issues that we're going to be discussing are a section of C-59, which are a package of amendments to the Competition Act. Now, the Competition Act, among other things, deals with advertising and marketing claims. And advertising and marketing claims are sort of communications and statements that businesses might make about their businesses, their products and services. And the changes that were introduced to the Act relate to what's broadly known as greenwashing. And so what has been done with the Competition Act is to provide more specific and expressly targeted prohibitions and standards with respect to making environmental claims about products, services, and business activities. And so as I can sort of delve into, the Competition Act always has had provisions with restrictions on, the clarity and accuracy of claims made about products and services. What's different now is that there is a focus on environmental claims and greenwashing, and new provisions that set out where the guardrails are, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but also the extent to which penalties can apply, what those penalties look like, and also the extent to which parties on the other side, that is, consumers, businesses, and stakeholders that have an interest in environmental concerns, can actually get involved in challenging claims made by businesses.
Now, I'm sure there's some. We don't want greenwashing. We don't, and there's probably some low-hanging fruit out there. Like, it's common sense. Yeah, that company or organization should not be claiming that because there's no way they could ever prove that. But to me, there's a whole bunch of gray area here where doesn't this set us up for a lot of activist lawsuits, frivolous sort of challenges, and then burdensome costs for companies having to prove what they're saying is actually statistically true? Or how do you see this?
I think that it's fair to say that the new provisions and the new focus on greenwashing has caught the attention of both businesses who are making claims in this area, and also stakeholders on the other side, associations and activists who are sort of in the business, if you will, of monitoring what businesses are claiming and whether they can back them up. And so there will be, and I mean, what you haven't mentioned is that the Competition Bureau itself has signaled that the regulator is paying attention to this area as well. All of that means that, yes, there is the potential for a lot more scrutiny, a lot of more close watching of what businesses are saying about their products, services, and what they're doing on the environmental side. And there is now more of a framework for those who have an interest in making sure that those claims are true and getting involved and raising complaints and taking formal action to make sure that if there is a statement that's questionable or not supported or unfair, that is dealt with through the process that the Act sets out.
Have you looked comparatively to other jurisdictions, other countries? Are we getting in line with how other countries are dealing with this, or are we going above and beyond and setting a new bar when it comes to dealing with greenwashing?
It's certainly the case that other countries around the world have been looking at this space, the US and Europe, and have been having more of a legislative and enforcement focus around environmental claims, greenwashing, trying to set up a framework where there is some guidelines, both for the businesses and also for, consumers and others who are interested in this, to know what is a fair comment, what kind of support is needed to make a statement. When we're talking about environmental claims, obviously sometimes the products, the services, the claims themselves can be very technical, can be very scientific. And so it is an international focus to make sure that there are some forms of standards or parameters in place, guidelines for everyone to know what's a proper statement about what somebody is doing, what's a proper statement about what a product can do, what the benefits are, etc. Above and beyond, I'd say that Canada is being fairly aggressive, but it's not Canada's not an outlier in the respect that Canada is not operating in a vacuum. This definitely is an area that that has been looked at and has been legislated in other countries as well.
We've seen oil and gas companies, take down posts from social media, scrubbing claims on their website already. That made me think right away of the industry of agriculture and how it could potentially be impacted by this C49 or 59. Sorry, what's your thoughts on that? Agriculture impacted, and some thoughts on just what we need to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely agriculture would be affected here. And it is important for associations within the space and businesses in the space to take some time to learn a bit more about what's going on in this space. And I can talk a little bit more about, the next steps so that they can respond by either, changing their policies around what's stated, making sure that they're checking in terms of, whether if there are industry standards in place or industry practices in place for making certain types of claims about, recovered energy or efficiencies, that they are sort of staying within the scope of those types of existing standards. There are definitely things that businesses can do in the agricultural space to get a little bit more confident about how they should proceed. A bit of context might be helpful, just to talk about what the new provisions look like. There's a couple of them. One is that it's now prohibited within the greenwashing space to make a statement about a product's benefits for protecting or restoring the environment or being environmentally friendly. If that statement isn't based on an adequate and proper test, meaning that there isn't, you really need to have some support that is, objective, that really allows you to put forward a clear and accurate, well-supported statement about the product. That's with respect to products and services. Mm-hmm. The second is the one that's garnered even a little bit more controversy because it's a similar provision stating that you have to back up your claims and make sure that you've got adequate and proper support for a claim about the environmental, I'm going to say environmental friendliness just for simplicity, with respect to a business or a business activity. And here, the standard is adequate and proper support in accordance with internationally recognized methodology. Mm. So here, where you're talking about a business activity, I don't know, energy recovery or efficiencies, that kind of thing. Something that's a practice within the an activity within the agricultural space. The standard to know whether your support for the statement or claim is good enough is internationally recognized methodology, and so that is very broad. And it's not defined in the Act what internationally recognized methodology means. It's fairly vague in that sense. And that is the phrase and the sort of the standard that has caused a lot of concern, because businesses in all sorts of different sectors are not necessarily in a position to know, okay, well, which internationally recognized methodology and is the one that I think is good enough. Is the Competition Bureau going to agree? Are stakeholders on the other side going to agree that this is this is acceptable? And so there's a lot of concern in that area. I can say that the Competition Bureau has just announced this week that it is running a consultation around these very provisions that I just referenced, and the comments are due by the end of September 27th, and so there should be a lot of we can expect a lot of industries, including potentially agricultural associations and businesses, weighing in on what that should mean or what it should not mean, the scope of that, so that they have more certainty, more confidence about how to back up claims.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. Is the result sort of what we see in the oil and gas sector, where companies are, we're not going to claim anything? Because what I've seen in some of the Alberta press is the oil and gas sector saying, like, this is a way to prevent a sector from talking about some of the things that it's doing or that are good for the environment, and the financial consequences here are too high. The legal costs are too high to have to prove our claims, so therefore we're just not going to say anything. Is that kind of the direction that potentially this heads, especially for industries that are not as financially equipped to fight some of these battles?
Yeah, so there are some real concerns here, because the new provisions focusing on greenwashing are accompanied by some very significant potential penalties, financial penalties that are as high as 10 to 15 million, the greater of 10 to 15 million per offense, basically per claim that's gone through the system and found to be unsupported, or 3% of global revenues. So those are very, very significant financial penalties.
Wow.
And also there is the possibility, given the new structure under the legislation, for stakeholders who want to challenge some claims to have private access to the Competition Bureau, the Competition Tribunal for deceptive marketing. And so before these provisions were brought into force, the access to the Competition Tribunal was solely through the Competition Bureau, meaning only the regulator could bring these types of challenges. And now that avenue is open to associations or private parties who want to bring a claim directly themselves.
I'm going to give you two examples. I just picked two random examples in agriculture. Okay, first one, Dairy Farmers of Canada. On their website, it says, across Canada, dairy farmers are working towards a greener future. They're taking sustainability steps in the field to improve soil, support biodiversity, and prioritize regenerative agriculture. Canola Council. Okay, Canola Council of Canada says canola and its production system are currently part of a healthy agricultural ecosystem and has evolved to enable biodiversity, sequester carbon, and produce more canola per acre than before as part of our blah, 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 blah. Okay, so both, those are two examples. There's a lot of them in the industry making the claim, hey, we sequester carbon. There's a lot of companies on products saying this, this improves soil health. Those are just small words, big meaning. That seems to me like now we're going to have to okay, how much and how so? Those kinds of things. Am I reading too much into this?
I think it's fair to say that those types of claims are going to be included in the scope of the types of statements that are going to attract more scrutiny. And those claims are made not only because they are positive for business in terms of showing the efforts and the investments that they're making in this area, but consumers want to know as well. Consumers want to hear those messages. And so it's important, going back to what you mentioned earlier about sort of a chilling effect in this space, it's important for messages like that to continue to be made. But there is a new concern around precisely those types of claims, because there isn't yet the type of guidelines and certainty around what's acceptable and not. I should add that there was in 2008, the Bureau had developed a set of fairly rigorous and detailed guidelines around environmental claims together with the Canadian Standards Association. And it was a very helpful document, but the Competition Bureau has archived it and said that it's no longer the formal set of guidelines anymore. And so there's a bit of a void, both around that internationally accepted methodology statement and in terms of, good, solid guidelines for folks to turn to know what they can continue to post on their websites, to say on social, even to say in their annual reports.
Yeah. So this isn't a for sure thing yet, but there's a consultation happening, or what are the next steps? Give us an update before we wrap up.
Sure. So the provisions are now the law. The next steps include a consultation that the Competition Bureau is running to develop some more guidelines in this area about what standards are acceptable for supporting claims. And we do expect there to be a heavy involvement from all sorts of different industries in those. And once the Competition Bureau has completed that consultation, we do expect the Bureau to publish a new set of guidelines to address things like what is a proper prior test to support these claims. And we hope that will include examples of types of claims that could be made that would be acceptable, and what international standards might be up to snuff in terms of supporting those claims as well.
Well, Margot, fascinating stuff. I really appreciate your insight here. There looks to be, there hasn't been a lot of talk about this in the agricultural industry, so clearly there's some bit of a wake-up call you've provided here for stakeholders. Thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
That was Margot Patterson. She is a counsel with Dentons in the Regulatory Practices Group based out of Ottawa. Boy, if that's not a sobering wake-up call for everybody in the industry we just heard there about C-59, I don't know what is. I think this is not the last time that we are going to hear about this piece of legislation. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Big thanks to Olds College for being today's show sponsor for the AgSmart Educational Expo. And like I've been saying all day, you can find out more by going to agsmartolds.ca. Make sure if you do go, you say hello to Real Agriculture, because we will be there on site, on location, taking in all of the festivities. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio. And we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.